Welcome to the Profits on Purpose podcast, where we explore the journeys of purpose-driven founders and the financial strategies that have helped them survive and thrive. I'm your host, Nate Littlewood. Today's guest is Alex Hildebrandt, the Peruvian-American co-founder of SUYO Pisco. After a career in investment banking and corporate development, Alex felt a pull back to his roots, and in 2019, he and his friend, now co-founder Ian Leggett, visited remote vineyards in Peru and were captivated by the artisanal pisco makers whose spirits rarely leave their villages. So they quit their jobs and created SUYO, a B Corp certified brand that shares revenue with partner producers and introduces single origin Pisco to the world. Alex's story is one of bridging cultures, learning an entirely new industry from scratch, and navigating the tension between purpose and profitability. Today we'll be discussing bootstrapping versus raising capital, the challenges of regulated distribution, and how he's building a brand meant to last. Alex, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Nate. Happy to be here.
Of course. So I want to start off talking about the backstory here, Alex. SUYO aims to empower artisanal producers and really showcase Peru's terroir. As a first-generation immigrant, what was it that drew you to wanting to build the Pisco brand? And how does kind of representing your culture and origins really shape the way that you're running the company today?
Well, first of all, Nate, I would say your intro was very comprehensive. So I think you touched on a lot of the main points already. So thank you for that. I'll use those maybe as building blocks for a little bit more behind what caused us to start SUYO. So before it was Pisco, I mean, obviously Pisco wound up being what we decided to bring to the U.S. and serve as the bridge, if you will, for us. It was more about wanting to do something that celebrated our culture as Peruvian Americans. Myself and my friend and now business partner Ian, we wanted to create a business that allowed us to celebrate something that was uniquely Peruvian in the U.S. and cause more interest in this place that we came from, but also really to bring people together. And what started off really as more than an idea than anything else wound up becoming Pisco, because we couldn't really think of anything that was more uniquely Peruvian than Pisco, to be honest with you. Pisco is the flagship spirit of Peru. Any Peruvian knows about Pisco and or has tried Pisco. What we found was that outside of Peru, is a spirit still to this day that remains largely unknown. So we felt a lot of pride and a lot of passion behind uncovering something new, I think, to most consumers. To maybe give you a little bit more detail on how personally I was inspired by it. As you mentioned, I'm a first-generation immigrant who moved to the U.S. when I was young, and I think there's sort of like two things that really drove me from the beginning. One, I would say, is my father, who moved us along with my mother at a young age to the U.S., is an entrepreneur himself, and I don't know if it's genetics or just growing up around that environment. And I think there was always this desire to build a business, and that only became stronger as I was sort of I think growing within corporate America and sort of climbing the ladder. I had this draw back to creating my own business, but then, arguably, I think more strongly growing within me was this feeling of, for those out there who are first or second generation immigrants, or even more than that, I think this may be relatable to them, that as you grow up in the U.S., I think there's often this strong pressure to assimilate. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we want to prove that we belong here. And in order to do so, let's act as American as we possibly can. And I think with that comes some, sadly, some shame associated with where you come from. It's don't speak Spanish at home. Let's not be loud and proud about Peru. Let's make sure that people understand that we're here to fit in, and that's, I think that can be quite toxic, really. And I think it's too bad. And I felt that as I was growing in my adulthood, I was losing a lot of that Peruvian heritage and culture.
Interesting.
The majority of my family still lived in Peru, so it's kind of odd that I was
Yeah.
traveling there all the time and seeing them, but still felt like I was becoming less Peruvian as I was growing older. So I, I
Hmm.
really I really felt like creating Suyo, and to this very day, I find that every single day it brings me closer to my roots. It was sort of that reconnection from the beginning, and
Mm.
um, we everything that we do now at Suyo is with the mission of celebrating Peruvian culture. Every single
Hmm.
event that we do, we want to make sure that we're loud and proud about being a 100% Latino-owned business, and we want
Mm.
people to know all these things that
Hmm.
many years ago I wouldn't have been as loud and proud about. So I think
Yeah.
from a personal note, it's kind of that entrepreneurial bug combined with
Hmm.
that pride to reconnect with my
Mm.
roots.
That's so interesting. I hadn't appreciated that. I guess you'd call it a cultural dilution perspective as a first generation immigrant. But I guess doing this enables you to, still feel connected to your roots, but at the same time, I gather you're introducing something quite new and novel to a lot of the US market, right? And so I assume this is kind of a way for you to help, spread something that's culturally significant to you with a much wider audience than would otherwise be exposed to it. So that's a really cool way of framing it. So, from what I understand, Alex, you went from a career in investment banking and corporate development into the world of spirits. I'm curious, as someone coming from that background, what were some of the skills or competencies that you think were most helpful to you as an entrepreneur? And were there perhaps others that were less helpful? And were there maybe some skills that you had to unlearn or use learn how to use rely on your instinct?
Yeah, this is definitely a two-sided coin. there, there are pros and
I
cons,
bet
I
there
think.
are.
Um, I think that the ones that come to mind right away are, I'm not going to call it multitasking because I do think that multitasking is something that very few people in this world are actually good at. And I actually have
Hmm.
found that I am not one of them. I think multitasking is extremely difficult. I'm going to
Yeah.
call it a made up term that I'm sure has a real term called multi projecting. At
Okay.
any given time, I'm, I'm trying to manage perhaps dozens of different projects. And
Hmm.
this was the norm coming from the investment banking world where you're you're having to work on many deals at a time, and it's really a volume business. The only way that the model works, I was working in mergers and acquisitions, so we had to
Hmm.
have a lot of live deals in the market at once because that many of them are not actually going to transact,
Yeah.
and you're compensated largely based on success fees. So if you
Hmm.
don't have dozens of deals in the market, you're not going to be successful. So uh, you have to be willing and able to manage multiple projects and multiple clients at the same time. And that really carried through into the corporate development world, where corporate development in my role was sort of there were two parts to it. There was corporate strategy, which was working on a lot of internal reorg, organic growth strategy initiatives. Inorganically, it was more the mergers and acquisitions, which was a lot of what I was doing in investment banking. But we're actually looking at how we can grow the business by acquiring other businesses. In many cases, we're investing in other
Hmm.
businesses, and again, a lot of different projects happening at one time. So that being the norm for me for my career, I
Hmm.
think has definitely been helpful in starting a business that can be quite crazy and
Yeah.
never really a dull moment. So I think a lot of other people who didn't necessarily have that exposure might find it a little bit more challenging. That's the first thing that comes to mind. And then I would say maybe just like being organized in general. I think I've always been a
Hmm.
pretty organized person. I don't know that that was something that necessarily I learned in my prior life, as I refer to it.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that helped me thrive in my previous career. If you're just sort of flying by the seat of your pants, you're probably not going to be successful. There are some people out there who can figure it out. I'm not one of those. I think you have to Make
Yeah.
sure that you're keeping good notes and keeping a calendar. That's very relevant for what we're doing now. We have to plan production very far in advance. We have to set up a commercial calendar, a launch calendar, a social media calendar, an email calendar. These are types of things that I think seem like second nature, even though I don't come from the marketing world or the social media world or anything. But the actual planning and execution of it, I think, all stems from that some level of organization. And I would say the same thing about, thankfully, my business partner Ian as well. I think we're both pretty organized people. All that said, you can't plan for actually probably 90% of the things that happen in our day to day, and that's the reality of the world that I came from too. You have to be able to roll with the punches. You have to be able to pivot on a dime. As I said, most of the deals actually you're working on when I was working in banking are not going to close, and you have to be willing to accept that failure and move on to the next one. A bit of an athlete's mentality. It's the next play. It's always the next play. Our days are up and down like this, and I find it helpful to turn my days into quarters sometimes. I lost the first quarter. Fortunately, I got beat up, and today is actually a perfect example of that. Before I hopped onto this podcast, I felt like I lost the first quarter today, so I need to make up for it in the second, third, and fourth quarter. That tends to be Mondays for me, to be honest with you. But as long as we can come out on top at the end of the day, I think that's the most important part. Does that answer kind of answer the question?
Yeah, no, I get that. Tell me about the flip side, though. Are there any parts of running an e-commerce business where you think your background may actually be hindering you in some way?
Yes, and I'll touch on this a little bit later too. I would say I don't know that I can accurately call us an e-commerce business, even though we do e-commerce. That's one of our, I think, multiple revenue streams. E-commerce is a very unique thing in the beverage alcohol space. But so I'll answer it from I'll say D2C perspective, even though, again, nuance with when you're beverage alcohol, you're technically not allowed to sell direct to the consumer. But in my mind, the consumer is my ultimate end buyer. So that's who I am wanting to pitch to and to sell to. This is a bit of a generic response that I think would apply to other industries as well, but nothing will ever prepare you for the way that the consumer behaves. And I was operating more in a B2B world where the buyer tends to be more sophisticated, knows what they're looking for, and or behaves in a certain type of way that if you've worked in the corporate world, is just sort of table stakes. You receive an email, it's generally accepted that you respond within 24 hours. You don't say rude or inappropriate things via email. A lot of things that are just sort of second nature. And I think having grown up in a corporate environment got me accustomed to that, when the reality was you're coming into not only a startup world, but then also in an industry that I would say, no shade here, but I think tends to behave a lot differently.
Interesting. So true.
Yeah.
So true. So the other day, Alex, when we were catching up and getting to know each other, we spoke a little bit about the way that you are kind of highlighting the producers. And I think you're actually including the producer names on the bottles, which is fantastic from, a connectivity perspective to, the customer. But I understand that sort of strategy and approach is probably going to be very difficult to maintain as you kind of scale up the business. Could you talk a little bit about how you are planning around that and how you kind of maintain the mission of connectivity to the origins as you're also juggling the need to scale and, build a profitable business? I think you mentioned the other day that there's actually been a couple of interesting case studies that you looked at as well here.
Yeah, great question. There are two elements of our business that I think at first glance may look to, whether it be, looking at it through a financial lens or through a general business lens, may seem like, why are you doing that? And that's one of them. The first one I'll just touch on real quickly, which is not that, is our revenue sharing program that we have with our producers. This is something that we believe is mission critical for us, and we believe that we have a responsibility to the industry to show the family, particularly small independent family producers who have mostly made Pisco historically as a hobby, or they could not sustain themselves. A lot of our, just quick side note, I would say, in fact, the majority of Pisco producers in the U.S. are also growing avocados or dates or apples or mandarin or all of the above as their primary source of income, and then Pisco is a secondary source of income / maybe a passion project.
Okay.
We feel like it's largely our responsibility to show them that there is a sustainable path to dependence on the Pisco category. We feel like there's a strong enough global demand to support many, if not all of you. And we're sort of leading that charge until we have a lot of work to do. Pisco's still a very unknown category. We feel like a good way to bridge that gap is our revenue sharing program. So a percentage of every single bottle we sell is going directly back to our producers. That's a sign of faith, but also a sign of, we are doing this together. We are on the same team. What's more, our one of our primary producers, who now is serving as our central hub for bottling and really all things production, is now actually an equity holder in our business. We truly brought him on as a business partner. So we put an agreement in place at the beginning of this year, where we have things like we have visibility into, there's a max amount of, there's a cap on price increases every single year for his services, for access to his space. He's promising to do certain things that give us the operational stability that we need and that we now have, in exchange for we have full access to his facility. We do vineyard tours there. We do lunches there. We truly are able to behave as if his bodega, his distillery and vineyard is ours. And also we have not gifted, because it is in exchange for services. We've granted him access to equity in our business. So that's super duper exciting. So that's kind of one piece. The second piece that you asked about, which is a totally valid point, one that we think about truly probably every single day, is the sustainability of this single origin model we have, which for the viewers and listeners who are not familiar, or just to be concise about it, all of our Pisco comes from one vineyard, one grape varietal, and from one vintage. So when you look at one of our bottles, which I have here, I'll hold up for you, you see that it's a 2018 vintage, and then you see exactly where on the map it comes from, and then you see the detail of the producer, the altitude, the soil type, the average annual rainfall, these things that in the wine world they refer to as terroir, this time and place, we think is very compelling. And it's on brand for us in our journey to elevate the way Pisco is viewed around the world. The trade-off is, as you hit on the head, is how scalable is that model? Thankfully we're still small enough where it's very, very feasible for us. It's caused a lot of pain points for us. I mean, and just as simple as labeling, we can only buy, every label's different. So we don't have the economies of scale of buying, tens of thousands of labels at a time. It's like 2,000 to 5,000 labels at a time, depending on the size of our batch. The ABV changes every single time we do that, because we're not mixing years to get to a normalized proof. The truth is, Nate, we believe that long term we likely are going to have a product in the market that gives us more stability in terms of our volume and our growth trajectory. We're very close to that point, and what that product is still TBD. But for those out there who have been following the SUYO story, I think it's probably something along the lines of like a Solera style, which is combining different vintages to give us some more uniformity, if you will, and allow us to get these economies of scale. But also give perhaps the mixologist out there who is looking for a pisco that's always going to taste exactly the same every single time. Maybe it fulfills that demand. But I just want to be clear that right now, that is not what we stand for. Part of what we think is so exciting about the pisco category is that every single year gives you something different. Pisco's made from grapes, so much like a wine, each vintage is giving you a different product. We're celebrating that by leaning even further into it and only using 1 year, and only comes from one plot of land. You can see exactly where it comes from, and you can try 2 different vintages side by side, and it's going to have a slightly different flavor profile. You put it in a cocktail, I promise you're not going to notice, and a lot of people probably won't even notice when you try it side by side, but to a discerning consumer, I think you're going to notice some subtle differences, and we think that's a beautiful thing. And we also think that, we know that this is happening in other categories, and it's super exciting to see. Take tequila, for instance. There's a lot of brands out there who are really celebrating the terroir of tequila. There's lowland agave, there's highland agave. What's more, I think you see it more in the mezcal category because it's a larger denomination of origin where it comes from. So this is not a foreign concept that we're introducing. We do believe we're the first in the U.S. to be doing it in the Pisco category. But as we look to grow, there's no doubt we're going to have to modify the way we're doing things. I will just end that point with saying that our single origin series that we have now, that are two flagship expressions, I'll hold them up here. These are the 2 first products we launched. These are kind of the 2 heroes. These will never go anywhere. So even if we were to theoretically launch a new line that is more scalable, this line will always exist because we want to be known as a single origin Pisco, even if we're putting something out there that needs to be done a little bit differently to allow us to scale further.
Interesting. Alex, you said something really interesting a moment ago that I want to circle back to, which is your partnership model with your co-packer. So I hear from founders of brands all the time about the struggles and problems that they have, basically finding, advertising agencies, co-packers that they trust. Trust and reliability is a huge obstacle for a lot of brands in kind of getting the support that they need. What you just described was a really interesting approach to that, in that you have aligned interest by basically giving this party access to equity in your business. So that essentially means they're going to think like a shareholder because they will be a shareholder. Can you talk a little bit more about why you decided to take that approach with this partner? And are there any other parts of the business that you've potentially ruled out from taking a similar approach?
I would never tell another founder out there to lead the conversation with your co-packer with, can we do some sort of revenue sharing and or equity arrangement to get started? I would say find the cash to make sure that you don't do that right off the bat. That's not the way to lead. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm advocating for that. This is a relationship that we built over 5 years, and we finally decided that we felt like the best thing for both parties was to, it gives us a lot of operational stability. It was a no-brainer for us. We now can use his bodega, which we helped him finance as well during the build-out, which was just completed last year. Because of what is in place now, we can use it as our centralized bottling facility. When I say he, by the way, his name is Romulo Del Carpio. His family has become good friends with us, and he doesn't need to be. They don't need to be there. When we have literal keys to the facility. So it really is like we're doing this together, and more than anything, it was about the alignment of incentives. We are also working with other producers, and for him and for his family to feel confident and excited about bottling other producers' Pisco in his facility, we want to make sure that there's financial upside for them to do that. So there should be no jealousy or any type of adversarial type feeling because we're bringing other Pisco in through here. You have the exact same incentive we have to put the best product out there. So I guess the bottom line there is I would tell people never enter that arrangement at the very beginning. This is something that was developed. This relationship was developed over a long period of time, and ultimately we decided as a brand who didn't own our own facility, rather than investing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in actually building an entire distillery, we can gain access to one via this arrangement. It's much more approachable for us at our scale. So everyone's situation is definitely unique, but this one, without a doubt, makes most sense for us.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess what I'm hearing is this is absolutely not something that you rushed into. This was 5+ years in the making, and you guys already knew each other very, very well. I guess reading between the lines, there might have been a financing need for it. Perhaps you got some discounts on services by providing equity instead. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I don't know if the way the dollars net out, I guess it probably does end up potentially being a discount. But the one, I would say, financial term that's the most tangible that I can point to is the cap on price increases year over year. Yeah. So the way that, to be super tactical about it, the way that we're set up is we're physically purchasing Pisco, completed Pisco from him, and we have either financed or helped finance these initiatives. So, we really feel like we've contributed a lot here, and we'll continue to do so as they've contributed a lot to our journey, and we just really feel like we're on the same team. That's the idea.
Interesting.
And with all that said, Nate, I mean, we do work with other producers too. Yeah. So I don't want to make it sound like we're leaving them out. It's just that everything runs through this one facility now. Yeah. We're getting Pisco from other producers as well, which is very, very beautiful liquid. It's just all the bottling is now happening in one place, which was a huge operational, a huge stamp of operational stability approval, I would say, for us.
I bet. Yeah, no, it's certainly smart to do what you can to instill or build stability into your supply chain. One less thing to worry about. And as well or better than most people that how ridiculously busy it can be running a business like this. So I find the strategy you've taken there really interesting. Tell me a little bit about distribution and distribution strategy. My understanding is that you've chosen to go deep in a few markets rather than chase national distribution at this stage. How did you come to your strategy on distribution? And is there any particularly good or bad advice that you have received on this topic along the way?
Yeah, I can work backwards here and say at this stage in the life cycle of SUYO, I would say bad advice we've heard is anybody who has told us get national distribution.
Okay.
That to me is just automatically bad advice for us and for most people. This is not for everybody. If you are an industry veteran who is very well capitalized, who has a product that has been product market fit has been very validated, and or maybe you have a celebrity on board, the approach may be different. National distribution may make sense for you.
Yeah.
But I would say for the vast majority of founders out there who are looking to build something in the beverage alcohol space, one of the best pieces of advice we've ever heard was to go narrow and deep. So we have been very deliberate with our approach there. We focus on, just where I sit now is I'm in Boston, Massachusetts. And because I'm here, it's a market that's made a lot of sense for us to focus on, but it was not our first and is not our strongest market. New York was where we launched the brand in 2022, and where I spend a lot of my time. We feel like that's proving ground for a brand. If you can, if you can cut your teeth there, you can be successful anywhere else. So that's kind of the playbook that we followed is get as much penetration as you possibly can in New York, get into the top bars And in theory, there should be a bit of a trickle down effect. Other bartenders and industry people around the city will see that, oh, bar X, which is very well known, is working with it. That's a bit of validation. So driving engagement, awareness, velocity for us has been priority number one since day one. What that's turned into is, I'm going to count, when I say our top 3 markets here, I'll count Lima, Peru, because that's where Ian, my business partner, is, who obviously is an extremely critical part of the story. Peru is because it's a denomination, because Pisco is a denomination of origin controlled spirit, it has to be made in Peru. That is the production hub. But at the same time, Lima, Peru is a really large market. Bit saturated in the Pisco space because there's so many other Pisco brands, but we do have a strong presence there too, and we always will. We feel like we really have to really be, to be authentic. So I'm including Lima in our top 3 markets as well. So our top 3 markets are New York, Massachusetts, Boston in particular, where I live, and then Lima, Peru. Those 3 markets are 80+% of our revenue, of our sales depletions. Probably more like 85. And that's where we want to be. We're no shade toward the other 8 states that we're in the U.S. So we have distribution in 10 states, technically, but we're really focusing 95% of our efforts into 2 of those states, which are New York and Massachusetts.
Okay.
Kind of like 80-20 rule, I guess, but we just feel like before we go spend dollars traveling to California, for instance, awesome market, a lot of opportunity for us there. Via our first distributor on the East Coast, we are able to sell in California. We got into Total Wine there, which was super exciting for us, really great validation. But at this stage in our brand, we don't really have the resources to hire someone full-time out there, nor do we think that that's the best use of our time and energy and funds. So we're kind of developing the playbook in New York and in Boston. And once we feel like we really have that solidified, let's go transport that in California because we're there. Let's look at expanding into new distribution markets that we feel like are culturally similar to where we've proven ourselves, and who also have large markets of affluential people and or Latinos. I'll say DC is a really exciting market for us because it's relatively easy to get to as well. Probably next on that stage of evolution is going to be Florida. Florida might as well be a different country. It's crazy for a number of different reasons, but as long as it's something that basically we can get on a 2 to 3 hour flight to, and maybe do a 2-day trip to, I think that makes sense for us. But until then, it's mile deep and inch wide. We don't have any other states planned in our 2025 growth plan. When we came into 2025, it was, no, let's absolutely rip the cover off the ball in our existing markets before we even start talking to other distributors. And that's what they want to see too. Yeah. If you come to a distributor with, hey, look, this is what we've done in this market, that's way more exciting than, hey, we have this really cool brand. We think it will do well. So can you give us a shot? That doesn't really move the needle, at least in our experience, doesn't really move the needle for a distributor. They want to see numbers and they want to see plans of action. Yeah. Very smart. Very smart. I do want to ask you a question about that. I just need a quick break to turn on the AC. It's timed out and I'm starting to get very hot here. Okay. So I want to ask you a question about this this distribution stuff. So I appreciate the strategy, and focusing on New York makes sense because it's kind of the place to be, a very influential part of the country, I guess. Massachusetts, I understand, is where you live, and so you've got geographic proximity there. I guess the fact that you are focusing in your own backyard like that kind of implies to me that there's a very strong relationship component to the sales process here. I gather it must be extremely important for you to physically be able to, meet and greet, shake hands, and see people face to face.
Aside from that one-to-one contact, which I'm inferring is quite important here, what are some of the efforts that go into placing, scaling, and growing the brand? Like, what are you doing digitally? What other forms of marketing are accompanying this? And can you tell us a little bit more about, the state level strategy and what that looks like?
Yeah, great question. The first thing I would say, which is the least scalable, I think, growth channel
Mm-hmm.
is is the people, at least at the sales level. I'm very much of the belief that selling something that is largely new to the consumer is a contact sport.
Mm-hmm.
So we have taken the view that every opportunity that we have to show up physically to talk to you about it, we will take.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do staff educations. We're going to do tastings, getting liquid to lips. We need you to interact with the product. And we want you to hear, I'll talk to you for hours, unfortunately, probably for you, about how excited I am about our story and our product
Yeah.
and terroir, but the consumer doesn't have that time. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
need to have our 1 to 2 bullet points ready to go that you're hearing. And there's some adaptability to, okay, what do we think this consumer is going to be most interested in based on, we're going to have to pretty quickly, we go through trainings of this with our team.
Yeah.
What are these cues that you're seeing? Where are you? What part are you in the suburbs? Are you in the city?
Mm.
Like what other bottle are they holding in their hand when they come up to talk to you at the liquor store? All these things that you're going to, you have to, there's some judgment that comes with it, but you have to try your best to read your cues.
Mm-hmm.
But liquid to lips is by far, we think at this stage, the most important thing that can happen. Trying the product,
Mm-hmm.
engaging with it, understanding what our story is. Beyond that, there is a successful digital strategy out there that we haven't found yet. We've tried, Nate, we've tried a little bit of everything, and we are not obviously the be all end all. Just because I'm saying that it works doesn't mean it worked for you and vice versa. For instance, we've found social media to be particularly challenging. I fully recognize how powerful of a tool social media is and can be. I find for something that's not a D2C product, or if it is a D2C, which we technically do sell on our website, alcohol purchasing tends to be more of an impulse buy.
Mm-hmm.
So like, hey, I'm going to walk to the liquor store on the corner on Friday after work to grab a bottle for the party on Friday night, or maybe on Saturday. But it's not as common that you're buying a bottle today on Monday, which it is, for a party this weekend.
Yeah.
Consumers are less likely to they're not really accustomed to waiting 5 to 6 days, which is what it takes in alcohol shipping, because there's different states have different compliance laws. So to pass through each one of those states, you have to check those boxes, and it takes time, unfortunately. So my point there is, social media is certainly an important leg of the marketing stool, but I don't think is the be all end all for a brand like ours. It's good for education and awareness, but not for driving actual purchasing behavior. One thing that we're sort of rolling out actually right now, you've had us at a really interesting time, that I'm extremely excited about, is we feel like we have a very engaged listserv. Those who sign up for our email newsletter, it's not that large of a newsletter because we don't really advertise it, but those who actually come and sign up on our newsletter, they email us back and ask questions, ask when our next release is going to be available. So what we've done is, and what's actually hilarious, Nate, and it's kind of intuitive if you think about it, I haven't really gone through and actually done the math because I think this would take a long time, but I'd be willing to bet that over 50% of the people on our mailing list, which has between probably 400 and 500 people on it now, I'd be willing to bet that over 50% of them don't have any social media whatsoever. So we're communicating with an audience that's their that's their interaction with us. They're not seeing that I posted the exact same thing yesterday on Instagram. These are people who are consuming content differently and tend to be more engaged consumers, at least in our experience so far. So I give you that context because what we've done and are rolling out in real time is a more defined strategy with this is we have this product line called our exploratory series, which I just showed you our 2 core products. We have this entirely different line that we launched last year, which is basically it's a really great storytelling mechanism for us. The short version of it is we're so often out there, Ian and I, where we're traveling around Peru in these really remote, obscure regions, and we come across some pisco that someone made in 2015 that we just think is beautiful and we want to bring it to market. But there's not going to be continuity in that product. This allows us to finally bring that to the table. So these are extremely limited releases. So we do limited drops of them. To date, we've just announced it on social media or like sent an email around to our listserv, and like we're talking such small amounts. Thankfully, they sell out pretty quickly. We're going to lean further into that, and we're going to start again. We haven't technically done this yet. We're launching a new website literally this week. A lot of moving parts right now, as there always are with a growing, new kind of young growing brand. Mm-hmm. But our goal is to start doing, lottery type drops with this product.
Interesting. That's fun.
And we think that's an exciting way for consumers to really feel, and it gamifies it a little bit. Like, oh, this is cool. SUYO has this new release, and they only made 180 bottles, and they're only making 50 available on e-commerce. Like, you have to sign up to potentially get access to it. And I don't believe in creating exclusivity that doesn't exist. I think that's kind of BS. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to make sure that the rare bottles that we're bringing are finding the people who will appreciate them the most. That's my goal with our exploratory series.
Interesting.
So that's just a long-winded way of kind of answering that. There's a digital strategy that we feel like is extremely important that we're still kind of playing around with a little bit, to be honest with you. We feel good about this one. I think we're going to see exciting results.
Interesting. That's really cool. I understand, you've given me a new appreciation for the importance of getting people to just engage with the product and sample this stuff. Like blasting Meta or Google with ads and talking about how wonderful Pisco is. It's probably not going to get you far if most people, haven't encountered the product before. They don't know what it tastes like. Or
maybe they can't even find it in their state.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not even available at the liquor store, or we can't ship to their state. These are real pain points to that strategy.
Interesting. I want to change gears a little bit and talk about your attitudes and approaches to capital, cash flow, and fundraising. So you're from the finance world. And I understand you bootstrapped this business initially for the first few years to get it off the ground. But then in 2024, if I'm not mistaken, I think you did a friends and family round. How did you decide that was the right time to do a fundraising? And what does the fundraising future look like for this business?
I think we reached a point of operational stability and commercial clarity that we felt was sufficient to go around and actually bring on investment. We had been hamstrung for quite a while with initiatives that we wanted to execute, and our reluctance to go do a capital raise was because we didn't, and I think truthfully there's a little bit of what's the word that when people I'll think of a second, when people are not confident in what they're doing because they think that other people know more than them. It's a very common term. I don't know why I'm
Imposter
not thinking
syndrome?
what it is. Imposter syndrome. Thank you. That's such a commonly used one. I forgot what it was. I think there was an element of that being people who felt like at the beginning that we felt like validation for us was was getting institutional money from some of the smart money in the industry, and there's very few players in this space who, beverage alcohol investors who are looking to invest in early stage businesses. We kind of look past the friends and family, to be honest with you. We were like, no, we feel like we can do that, but we want to get the smart money, and we didn't feel like we were prepared. But to be honest with you, without naming any names, I started interacting with a lot of those, and I was like, no, that's not actually what's going to make us successful.
Interesting.
Because I think there's some fallacies out there that, we're going to come in and we're going to be advisors and we're going to be very hands-on. We're going to roll up our sleeves, and no.
You started interacting with some of these investors, and if I'm hearing you correctly, you didn't feel like you were going to get value out of them, for lack of a better word, in terms of advice and support. Okay,
that's very much a part of it. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But then also with some conversations with people I'm very close with about how could you. You're not asking for charity. This is an exciting opportunity that you should include your friends and family in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think we feel weird looping in our friends and family on this, but it was just flipping the script that no, it would be extremely disrespectful not to give them the opportunity to be included on this. So
that's such a really important reframing you've done there. I think a lot of founders, might feel guilt and they might not feel comfortable asking the people around them for money. But what you're describing there is it would almost be a disservice not to ask them for money because, hey, I'm building this amazing company. I, love and respect you and you're part of my friend or family network, and I want you to be part of this journey with me. I think that's a really interesting perspective change you've gone through there.
Yeah, and it took us a little bit of time to get over that too. And I do think it's important to acknowledge that, of course, every single industry is unique.
Yeah.
What's more, the way that you want to build a business within an industry, the way you want it remembered, is going to vary based on the founder and the team who's doing it. We've taken a very, very long-term approach. So it was important for us to go to when we spoke to our investors, like, we want to be very clear with you about what the investment horizon is here. We don't, I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is, but this is not a, 3 to 5 year private equity flip. This may not be a 7 to 10 year investment where you're going to see monetization. We hope so. Trust me, that's what we're striving toward. But we believe that this investment is only right for you if you are going into it with a 10 plus year mental investment horizon. That's just the lens that needs to be viewed through, simply because it is a category that has so few viable players in the US at this moment. Again, we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think there will be more, but we feel like we're still pretty early in the game, and we're actively trying to get other Pisco brands brought to the US and other founders to launch them. But
love it.
It needs to be viewed through a long-term lens. And the parallel I'll draw, I think, Nate, you and I spoke about a couple of weeks ago, is mezcal.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a totally different product. Mexico is it's a Mexican culture is a more culturally relevant one to the average American consumer, seeing as how it's just over the border. And of course, it's a much larger country. But we do see a lot of parallels in the way that cocktail bars and consumers are enjoying Pisco and mezcal. And that category was a very slow build that was much aided by tequila. But if you look at the growth trajectory of mezcal 20, 15, 10 years ago, it looks a lot like where Pisco is now.
Interesting. Okay.
We think the next 10 years are going to look, maybe not absolute dollars wise, but in terms of growth trajectory, we think are going to look much like the previous 10 years looked like in the mezcal category. That's our bet.
Nice.
Hence the long-term lens.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask you two more questions. One will be about advice that you would give a younger version of yourself. And the final question is just where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're up to and the brand, okay? So, Alex, you've obviously learned a lot over this period. There's been some wins, there's been some losses, and you've done some really interesting stuff over the last few years. If you could turn back the clock now and speak with a younger version of yourself, a version of yourself who was just starting off his entrepreneurial journey, what is the advice that you would give him?
It's a tough one. There are a lot, I think. What comes to mind right away, I think, is a bit of a generic response, but it couldn't be more true. Is just to be patient. I, in particularly having spent a lot of time in the healthcare and tech sectors, and maybe some more high flying CPG industries. And then I've just said generally American culture, I think, tends to really expect results very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I've always placed those expectations on myself and on anything that I've been involved with. But I've learned firsthand that these things take a very long time. And success certainly is not built overnight. It's not built in a year, and in many cases is not built in several years.
Yeah.
So to look at things through a long-term lens and just stay true to what you're trying to do. Don't let external influences, don't compare yourself to the tech founder in Silicon Valley who, just sold his or her business for 50x revenue in under 3 years. That's not a comparison for me. And I congratulate them, but that's not a comparison. And instead stay true to what you believe. And I'll leave with, I think, I have no idea who said this quote or if it even is a quote, but I heard someone say this one time that it's important to build your business as if you're going to own it forever. Mm-hmm. Otherwise you might. So that's really been something that we think of every single day. We're building a business for the long term. We want to make sure we're building a business in a sustainable, and not just environmentally, we're talking socially and economically sustainable way that allows us to feel good about the way the business's long-term prospects. Mm-hmm. If someone comes along and, wants to have that discussion, we're here for it, but we're not building a business to sell it. We're building a business for long-term success.
I love that. Yeah. That's a great perspective. And it's certainly a very, very big long-term undertaking to build a business like this in physical products where you have inventory and you've got to finance inventory and you've got to, win and open up sales channels. So yeah, very, very good advice there. So Alex, I've really enjoyed this conversation. You have opened my eyes to all parts of the Pisco industry and the spirits industry that I hadn't really, thought about before. But it's clear to me that you've had a fascinating journey thus far and you're taking a really, really thoughtful approach to building this business. And so I commend you on that. If folks are interested in learning a little bit more about you personally, the business, the product, what are some of the places that they should go? And I'll include all of these links in the show notes for anyone who's interested, by the way. Thank you again, Alex. Really enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.